Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And before we get started, as always, like a little bit of news. And of course, at the moment, I haven't been able to play that much EVE Online because of the war deck, and it looks like my structures will be destroyed in detail, which at this point, I have absorbed that and it's fine, honestly. I follow rule number 1 quite strictly. I don't fly, deploy or put in structures anything that I'm not willing to lose. So this is really not that big a deal for me personally. I do want to thank everyone quickly for all of the support and all of the offer for support. A lot of you guys would be willing to jump in and to try to defend the structures. I'm choosing not to do that for a rather simple reason. I think it would just be delaying the inevitable, and it means that I'm just going to delay my next chapter in EVE Online at this point. As I've said, this is probably not about me, this is probably not even about ISK, this is just the new situation around Providence that is, having some impact in the high-sec systems around it, and Ital, of course, being at the forefront of that. They want to get rid of especially corporations with L structures in there. They need control of Ital themselves, and to me this only makes sense, and this is just part of a political shift in the landscape in a Mars space. And so yeah, we are part of the casualties there, you could say, but overall I am very positive. This is EVE Online, this is why I play the game, and I basically look forward and I'm motivated for the next chapter in EVE Online. Some plans are already brewing inside my head. Some people are already giving me some very interesting and cool tips about going to wormhole space. Lots of offers to, go take a visit in that space, go take a visit in this structure. I'm welcome almost everywhere. So yeah, thank you very much for all of that support. It's pretty overwhelming actually for someone that's actually treating this as a hobby and nothing all of that serious. Next up in-game news, I actually also quickly want to cover the changes to the nullsec bounty system with the, I think it's called ESS or something like that. So this bank where you can now, I think it is through the agency, and then you had to go for encounters, and then or was it exploration? Yeah, and then you had to move this. Yeah, the encounter surveillance system, where you can actually find a list of banks to rob, you could say, with like 20 million and 60 million ISK in it. Very, very interesting. I've actually been watching Bjorn B stream a little bit in small fleets going after these things, either taking a fight or trying to earn some ISK that way. Very, very cool concept, and definitely something that is now on my radar as well. With the right chips, right? Nothing too expensive, but with a small fleet, this is actually content that feels like it's pretty cool and very accessible through either the filaments or, well, wormhole space, of course. Wormholes into nullsec could be very, very cool. So actually think that this is a very interesting feature, and local seems to be out in GTA at the moment. Oh well, all right. Yeah, so as I said, the ESS is actually a very interesting feature for people that are looking for some PvP, perhaps some ISK making opportunities, and for diving into 0-0 without necessarily having to commit completely to that. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff actually. Next up, as always, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store here. Yeah, still I'm getting the same view as before, so even if I change this, price descending, yeah, it still shows exactly the same thing. Yeah, we were going to take just a look at these services basically to see if there's any sales here. Omega time still the same, multiple pilot trains here with all of this. Nothing special to report when it comes to the services in the New Eden store. And if I'm not mistaken, there was this sale on Omega time itself, so not in the store, not like you only need 450 plex or something like that for a month. Game time, which does have a big impact on the plex market. Yeah, your assets located in the structure are at risk. I'm well aware of that, thank you, client. What was I saying? Oh yeah, this sale could actually just decrease demand for plex a little bit as Omega time itself becomes cheaper, and you still need 500 plex to pay for it. So let's dive into the market. We will start with plex and stuff, and that's coming in at 450. like that. And let's take a look then at Plex. We will start with the chart, and you can see we are still pretty much flat, although today's daily average is up a little bit towards that 2.75 million. There's definitely hesitation and a slight uptrend to be seen at the tail end for Plex prices. In JITA itself, we're going for 2,840,000 ISK. Buyers are coming in just below 2.7 million, and then buyers go, well, hardly down when it comes to the player-owned trade hubs, and in fact there's 9 jumps out. That's in this actually is pretty damn interesting. I have been saying with the fall of Nyarsha has now been pulled into Pogven, the JITA may no longer be the actual center, and so this may be a first sign of someone attempting to locate that center of HiSec and to try to get some trade going here in something called Angkor Wat, yeah, I'm sure that this is like an ancient city or something like that, so there's bound to be a reference there, but it's 2.8 million, so very close to the price of Plex itself. And then let's take a look at what buyers are doing. Those are still definitely in the perimeter trading tower, going just above 2.7 million, so a slight upwards pressure on Plex, nothing too major. But what is interesting is this first little attempt here at creating some activity away from JITA for Plex. Next up, we have the multiple pallet trading certificates, basically flat right on the average for the last couple of months. Not a lot to report here. Sellers just below 1.4 billion ISK, buyers just below 1.3 billion ISK. Next up, we have the skill extractors that are also flat with, again, that 5-day moving average. Slight trend up there, but nothing too major. And we're talking 316 million for the sellers, 311 for the buyers. That is a very narrow margin between sellers and buyers for something that costs 300 million ISK. Next up, we have the injectors. Here are the large-scale injectors continuing their downtrend and now reaching another 1-year low point. Perhaps worthy of looking into it for a bottoming out and then an investment. Honestly, CCP being super generous at the moment with the skill points. I think that is putting pressure on the price here, but Plex is hesitating and starting to go back up. That should be counted as slight upwards pressure, so not exactly sure why this is going this low all of a sudden, despite what the hesitation in Plex. But 641 million for the sellers, 615 million for the buyers. Very pronounced 1-year low point. And the small scale injectors are also back at a 1-year low point. A couple of days very close to 130 million average price, 132 for the sellers and 122 for the buyers. That is of course a straight downwards trend for a full year here for these injectors. Let's see if it's the same thing for the large scale injectors. Yep, almost a year down. If you're looking for a yearly trend, this could be very interesting. And this of course is also in December, so an end to that increase which happened over the last year, you could say, happening around the holidays. So the holidays could be another point where the market decides to move in a different way, because CCP of course may be ending the influx of skill points, or definitely slowing that down substantially after the holidays, and that means that the holidays could be the right time to actually make your purchases. For the daily alpha injector, still a very strong performance, 5-day moving average staying above 45 million ISK, 46 million for the sellers and 40 million for the buyers. Very impressive to see this strong demand in alpha injectors. And then finally we've got the hypercores that are staying below 300,000 ISK. So activity may be down just a little bit, if that's the way we want to read this. 286,000 for the sellers, 276,000 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin. It's better than the summer of course, but a little bit of pressure here in the last month or so. Next up, let's take a look at the minerals. That's coming in at 930. like that. And as always, we will start with titanium. Of course, that is continuing to normalize. You can see that we went down in a pretty straightforward way from almost 10 ISK to that 7.5 ISK range, and here it looks like we are going to land 630 outside of JITA, 646, so practically 6.5 ISK for the sellers and 7 ISK for the buyers. Basically titanium has lost the gains from the last reshuffle, so that titanium is only available basically from HiSec, but players adapt to this. This is a sandbox, and if one activity becomes more valuable, it attracts more players to that activity, or at least more hours to that activity, which then normalizes the price against everything else. So overall, yeah, this is a nice little bump from titanium, but we are right back to a normal average. 7.5 is expensive, but considering the current circumstances in EVE Online and CCP's plans for the cost of resources, this is actually a pretty decent and normal price. Next up we have pyrite, which last week had overtaken titanium by quite a little bit and is managing to maintain that high point at around 17 ISK, 17.4 for the sellers, 18 in JITA itself, and 17.13 for the buyers. Buyers of pyrite forced up above 17 ISK. This is that inversion that has basically been normalized. Pyrite is or should be a little bit harder to get than titanium, so it should be a little bit more expensive, and now it is, well, practically twice, a little bit over twice as expensive, so it has caught up here, and this is very good news, of course, for people that are still holding on to old pyrite stocks, but at this point perhaps this has been mostly absorbed already, although yeah, this is quite noticeable, of course. 3 batches of 100 million units, another 100 million, another 80, another 86. This is a lot of pyrite that's coming to the market to take advantage, and this was for prices above 18 ISK, so you get a little bit of pressure at 17.5 as well, and as a result we will definitely stall here, but the market is now going to absorb all of these old reserves, and I do think that pyrite will find a normal price, perhaps 15 or something like that. I think twice titanium is a pretty normal historical pattern to look for. Next up, we have the price for Mixalon. That's actually going back up a little bit, so we're starting to seesaw our way, and we are staying well above 100 ISK at this point. 124 in JITA, so I'm going to take this off because 11 jumps, right? We're not going to count that. But yeah, 124 for the sellers, 109 for the buyers. Volume-wise here, we're definitely down quite a little bit, 30 million here, 5 million here. This is already, in my opinion, a normalized market, and it's definitely a premium over the historical normal price for Mixalon. I'd dare to put that at 75 and even below that. So this is a nicely expensive mineral that can be mined from HiSec. After that we've got Isogen, where we're looking for that inversion to fix itself as well, but that's not happening anytime soon, despite the fact that Isogen should now not be available in HiSec and should mostly be sourced from LowSec. It is still costing half the price of Mixalon at around 50 ISK. A slight move up here as well, 49.20 for the sellers, 43.90 for the buyers, but the difference of course is that we do still have large reserves here. Look at Mixalon volumes. 30 million is a big one, and then the rest is at around a million and below that. And then if you look at the Isogen volumes, 370 million units, another 90 million units. These are old reserves, another 70 down here. These are old reserves that are trying to be sold at what's already considered to be a pretty damn good price, and it is if you look at this full 1 year chart, of course, but keep this in mind, this ought to be harder to get than Mixalon at some point, so there may still be a lot of room to go up. It just needs a little bit of time, because this is of course a massive amount of Isogen that is still being sold. After that we have the Noxium chart that is also normalizing, heading for a price towards 1000 ISK, but it's still quite a bit more expensive than that. So another really big winner for the minerals, 1115 ISK for the sellers and below 1000 ISK for the buyers. So the buyers are now able to go below that, but of course if you look at the average price, we're actually very close to those sellers. Very same impact as with Isogen, of course. You have to get that from low sec. Mostly null sec is also an option. There's perhaps some tiny sources left in high sec as well, but for now all of this has to be imported, so these sellers in JITA are dictating the price, and you can immediately also see the impact on the volumes here. Couple million is the biggest sell order, 7.5 here, but that's it. And so Noxium is now completely in the hand of the sellers, of the people that are importing that into JITA or into the trade hubs, and that makes it rather expensive. After that, we have the Zydrine market that's also bouncing off of the 1250 mark. Not bad. Almost 1300 for the sellers, 1200 for the buyers. And here again, volume wise, it does look like everything has been absorbed. Couple million here, couple million there. This is again a movement from other spaces into high sec in order to sell that in the trade hub. After that, we have Megasite that is, well, able to maintain its gains, but this is also something that is in inversion. Still, historically speaking, Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine because a little bit harder to get. 732 for the sellers, 703 for the buyers. And here we again do see that difference, another 50 million units that's being sold at 740, probably seen as an opportunity to sell a big stock at a better price. So there's bound to perhaps be a little bit of inertia because of that. And let's also keep that in mind. Megasite has already gained 400 plus ISK here on the year. It just needs another 400 to basically get to that regular price. So it feels like that is very much possible. Whereas Isogen, for instance, in order to overtake Mexelon, has to still almost like triple in price, I think, to get to the normal range. So this is an inversion that doesn't need to overtake Zydrine by a lot, so just get into that same range, and I feel like we're there. And yeah, once the market gets through this 50 million, 60 million units that are over here, I personally feel like that could definitely happen. And then finally we have Morphite, our oddball out, that is also up for the week. Very interesting across the board. Last week we felt like we were going down, and now it feels like everything is going back up a little bit. 120 for the sellers, 109 for the buyers. Volumes are quite respectable, but I think that this is a tremendously, oh god damn it, it's Morphite, not Mexelon, so that's a little bit different. Flat for the week, but at a pretty damn amazing price. We're talking 27,400 for the sellers, 25,600 for the buyers, and this is more in line with the normal volumes for Morphite. Nothing above 1 million units, so again, same story, has to be imported into JITA 4.4. And right now very expensive on this 1 year chart. Investment price historically for Morphite has been below 10,000 ISK. Not something we'll see anytime soon, I think. Next up, the PI market coming in at 1740. All right, let's go through these and see if we spot any differences. So what seems to be happening here in broadcast notes is a little bit of an investment, right? We get a slight uptick in volumes over the last week, but you can also see that the price hardly goes over 1.5 million on the chart. So this is a little bit of a bottom picking by investors, which I can fully understand. 1.54 million for the sellers, 1.4 million, a little bit above that for the buyers. Volumes are down the drain, but so seems to be demand, and as a result we have 1 year low prices, and some people are picking up bargains. For the construction blocks, we have that very same thing. So you again have a double leg down to a 1 year low point below 7,500 ISK, and then a slight move up, but nothing close to getting back to average. 8,000 ISK for the sellers, 7,000 ISK for the buyers. So this again, during the last week, I think we hit what the market seems to be considered rock bottom for PI, and so some people are starting to make some moves. It's going to be interesting to see if they're right on that, or if we could go for even lower price points. Consumer electronics with daily averages ranging from 8,800 down to less than 7,500. Definitely not great. 7,800 for the sellers, that's quite a bit of pressure on that. 7,200 for the buyers, so this is actually still moving down for another 1 year low point. I think if you get buyers this low and more pressure coming in, yeah, this is not looking good. Next up, we've got the coolants market staying well below the 8750 on the chart. We're talking 9,000 disc for the sellers, but 7,700 for the buyers, for something that should easily get you 11,000 disc. Very, very much under pressure. Cryo Protectant Solutions landing on the 100,000 ISK barrier. 101 to 103 for the sellers, 93,500 for the buyers. This is the one gamble that I would say I'd be willing to take. All of them with this bump here, March, April, May, due to new implants. So if it is tied to implant production, right now we are seeing that pressure. You can buy it below the entire chart at less than 100,000 disc. That would make sense in my book as an investment, waiting for a new set of implants, which at some point is bound to come, but it could be a very long wait. We do have to warn for that. Enriched uranium, same little bounce here, trying to get back to 10,000 ISK. So this is again here in the last week or so, some volumes that are picking up the cheapest parts of the PI market. 10,240 for the sellers, 9,350 for the buyers. Yeah, this is investment, and pretty logical investment with a trigger at a 1 year low point. Integrity response drones, and these have been hovering at that low point for a little bit, so we get a slight move up, but if it's not very pronounced, the market is very skittish, nowhere close to the 2 million mark, which would still be below average. No, less than 1.8 million for the sellers and 1.7 million and below that for the buyers. So with more pressure, more supply, we could actually dive down even lower here. Mechanical parts, that one has a low point where it hit 8,000 ISK for like a month, and so here I do see that as a little bit of investment, pushing the price back above 9,000 ISK. 10,000 for the first sellers, 8,800 for the buyers. Not even that much volume, but a little bit of a move up. Still, again, looking at where we come from, this is grabbing the cheapest stuff available. Nanites is already doing that little bounce, so this is quite interesting to me. We get a little bit of a dump happening that drove the price to 5,000 ISK, and then again in the last week, a little bit of volumes pushing the price back above that. Let's see where those buyers went. Yeah, 5,600 for the sellers, 5,400 for the buyers. A little bit of aggressive buying in nanites, I would say, which is normal. You have this very nice March, April, May bump, which is tied to implants, and so if you want to be ready, you have to take advantage of the chart hitting 5,000 ISK, which some investors seem to be doing. Nano factories, excuse me, staying at that 1 year low point. Let's see if we can break the 750,000. Yep, for buyers 700,000, sellers coming in below 800,000. Yeah, 1 year low range, you could say here. Definitely seeing that pressure, a bit more pressure, and then we could see another slight bump again from investors. Organic mortar applicators not yet at a 1 year low point, but it's basically still seesawing its way down below 800,000 ISK. 840 for the sellers, 775 for the buyers, and it's just not happening for the buyers. But the market is very, very careful, right? Like with, I think the broadcast notes were an example. You get that little bump, but where are we? We are below 1.5 million, very, very pronounced 1 year low point. And so for organic mortar applicators, we have this historical low below 800,000 disc throughout the summer, so I think the market is going to wait for us to maybe even beat that before it jumps in. Recursive computing module is on that low point, reaching 1 million and below, just above 1 million for the sellers, 870,000 ISK for the buyers. We could see a little bit of buying driving the price up, but I don't think we'll go like above 1 million at this point. Robotics was in a very bad spot last week. Yep, exactly. And here that pattern is recurring. So keep this in mind, right? There are clearly PI investors that are starting to make some moves on these 1 year low points. Robotics went below 70,000 disc, a price that I don't think I've ever seen. And so now we're jumping ourselves back towards 75,000 disc. Again, slight volume increase, grabbing the very cheapest stuff. 74,000 for the sellers, 68,000 for the buyers. Pretty impressive for me if we're looking at market activity here, how the investors are very restrained in the PI market. They're really only picking what would be considered the very best bargains of the year on the chart. Self-harmonizing power cores had that little jump actually late last month in October, went back to the 1.5 million, and now the pressure is building again. First seller below 1.5 million, the lack of demand showing with buyers below 1.4 million. Any more supply is just going to crash that average price down very quickly. Sterile conduits, bit of a jump again after reaching 900,000 disc. It's the same story. And then you semiconductors with an April bounce. Unfortunately, well below the 50k mark. We've got a little bit of a pull up. 70,000 for the sellers, 65,000 for the buyers. Look at this 1 year chart. Semiconductors for me below 50k, that's where I would make my move. And then finally, wetware mainframes also bouncing off the 1.5 million. Slight uptick in volumes to be noted here as well. And 1.6 for the sellers, 1.5 for the first few buyers. But again, the lack of demand being quite clearly shown here. Next up, advanced wood materials, 2520. Let's take a look at the trends here. Definitely a market that I want to explore across more trade hubs as well. To be honest, I do think that I want to see if there are regional differences that could provide opportunities for fast transport from a wormhole that has a high-speed connection, something like that. Lots of possibilities, guys. This is why I love this sandbox. But let's try to focus on what's happening in JITA here. So crystalline carbonite, which last week had to pull back, but from a 1 year high point, is landing on the 150 range. 155 for the sellers, 147 for the buyers. Back on what I would consider to be an average price for crystalline carbonite. Next up, we have titanium carbide. That is okay, a little bit of volatility here. Was at a 1 year high point or close to it of 180. Then it drove the price back down to 150, which for titanium carbide is below average. And now we're moving our way back up to 170, which is getting pretty close to an above average price at 173. Buyers at 161. So some volatility in titanium carbide. Next up, we have ferrite carbide for Minmatar. Ouch, that does hurt a little bit, back on that 125 1 year low point range, or 1 year low range I should say. It's the two big jumps here due to the war that has been absorbed very quickly by the market every single time. Sellers at 135, one coming in at 126, very aggressive here. Buyers a little bit of a lack of demand, pretty obvious, below 125. And then finally tungsten carbide, that's continuing a slow downtrend on the 20-day moving average, clearly trading below average here as well, at 171 for the sellers and 161 for the buyers. Yeah, I'm very curious to see if tungsten, so Amar and Minmatar, would be in a very different spot in Amar itself, for instance. But I don't have anything set up to do that during this EVE talk or anything like that. Let's take a look at the metamaterials next that were actually behaving quite differently, in my opinion. Here are the photonic metamaterials. Yeah, despite the fact that the carbonite is back, but on an average price, so nothing too bad. We are talking 1 year low point for photonic metamaterials. So this is a very low price, 11,200 for the sellers, 10,600 for the buyers. Then we have for Caldari non-linear metamaterials, finally something that makes a slightly bit of more sense here, something that is starting to show some pressure in more metamaterials. So double the price, right? If you look at last week, 22,500, double the price of the Galente version. Now we're seeing that pressure. We're diving below 20,000 ISK. In fact, 19,200 for the sellers, 18,300 for the buyers. That is going to be 1 year low point again. If you look at this daily average, 5-day moving average, the blue line still has to catch up here, but that's a lot of pressure coming in all of a sudden. And well, if I look at what's happening for photonic, this could be a dive down that could have lasting consequences. Next up, we have plasmonic metamaterials. Also, clearly the pressure going below 15,000 ISK. let's see here, 16,200 still for the sellers, but 13,250 for the buyers. Clearly they want to go lower. And then finally terahertz metamaterials, that is now seesawing its way below 15,000 ISK, also very close to a low point, 14,500 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. So now we are seeing pressure across the board in the metamaterials, and for me this looks like very bad news for nonlinear metamaterials that could lose quite a bit of price from just the general pressure in this category. For the other advanced moon materials, yeah, I think we're gonna see more bad news. Fermionic condensates continuing the decline despite already breaking 70,000 ISK and on a very pronounced one-year low point, 63,000 for the buyers, 66,000 for the first few sellers. That is just very, very low. Ferrogel, slight stabilization below 30,000 ISK, which is like a quarter of the price down from the start of the year. So definitely confirming the low points. Fluoride staying below 750, 1 year low range. Hypersynaptic fibers landing on 10,000 ISK. So this is not a 1 year low point. Trying to hold on a little bit better, but buyers at 9,500 is still very, very low, of course. Nanotransistors trading at the 4,000 ISK range, which again is about a fifth of the price down from the start of the year. And high point went to 8,000 ISK, that's half the price. And yeah, normal range 5 to 6,000 ISK. Now we are trading quite a bit below that. Phenolic composites. Let's see here, more pressure, not a 1 year low point again because of a crash down below 1500 that happened before, but buyers are still at 1450, so this is clearly still a possibility. And after that we have the ceramic fibers that tried to dig its way back out of an October slump, again went to 1 year low point of 300 ISK and is already making its way back down there. 320 for the sellers, 292 for the buyers. And this is just I think the biggest casualty of what's happening in everything else. It seems to be to me that the other advanced moon materials just don't have ISK flowing into them, and quite a few of them are actually at very pronounced 1 year low points. So for your consideration, just like we're seeing some people start to take positions in PI materials, perhaps advanced moon mats are the lost category there where some opportunities still lie. I'd always be careful, don't spend your entire wallet on a single item or anything like that, but some small investments I think could be interesting for the medium future. Take two ships next, coming in at 3150. Like that, and let's see if we can spot some volatility. Unfortunately, Take 2 advanced moon mats under pressure across the board. That should put more pressure on the price of Take 2 ships, I think. So Basilisk coming away from 240 million on a couple of days, so away from the big sell opportunity that it was in. 226 now for the sellers, 205 for the buyers. Obviously still too high for purchasing, but we're on our way back down. The Cerberus was holding on last week and is still holding on to that 250 range. Very impressive. Look at the volumes as well. So quite a bit of Cerberus demand at the moment. It is an incredible PvE platform as well if you're looking for shields, missiles, and I think it still has drones as well. Quick check on that. Yep, 3 small drones, not great, but it will help for some of those really small targets that will get very close to your ship. So overall, a very strong PvE platform as well, but in PvP it sees a lot of use as well, and so as a result, yeah, looks like the volumes are up and the average price is easily maintained. The Guardian is making its way back down below 200 million ISK here, 188 now for the sellers, 173 for the buyers. You could already try an aggressive buy order on the Guardian, but yeah, keep in mind that the upwards potential seems to have been lowered quite a bit, I think because of the situation in advanced moon mats. Next up here we get the Hound, that's also back down. Immediately we're getting daily average at 22.5 million, so quite a bit of dumping happening indeed, down to almost 23 million for the sellers, 22 million for the buyers, and a lack of demand. Now, I'm still holding my hounds, unfortunately, so we're gonna wait for a better opportunity, but be very, very careful with the volumes here. You don't want to be stuck with a couple dozen hounds or something like that. At 22 million with this kind of demand, honestly, I would be very careful. I have 4 of them, I think, hounds holdings, let's see here, that I bought at 22.5, including taxes, so that was actually a buy price below 22 million, but that is something to keep in mind here. The production cost seems to be down, and this is not a lot of demand, so be very, very careful when it comes to volumes. I do think there are opportunities, but don't expect like a 35 million price to come very quickly. Next up here we get the Ichthyorsa. There is one exception, of course, Triglavian stuff still being pretty damn expensive. We're back below 700 million ISK, but still super expensive at 690 million for an Ichthyorsa, 606 for the buyers. After that we've got the Ishtar, kind of confirming that pressure. Look at the daily averages here going down towards 200 million, 204 for the sellers, 191 for the buyers. This is a very, very cheap Ishtar, but again, that same warning, this may look like, all right, time to buy lots of Ishtars. I would not do this. I would be a little bit afraid of just pouring too much ISK in there so that I won't get the opportunity to sell very quickly. I think I'd want to be very flexible. The Manticore is holding on, right? It looks like it's holding on to a price above 27 million. So 28 for the sellers and 24 for the buyers. That's actually a decently narrow margin in between the two. But this again is not like a high point of 35 or 30. Yeah, here once, twice. This went to 32.5. This is quite a bit more muted. There's some volatility. There's some trades to be done here. But again, be careful with those volumes. Next up here we get to Munin, back down below 200 million, I think. Yep, 208 for the sellers and 183 for the buyers. Big margin opening up here again between buyers and sellers. Do I have a Munin? I don't think I have one yet. I'm a little bit skittish on at the moment for tick 2. But again, if you can buy close to that 183, I think it's okay to do. Once you're buying multiple of them, I think you're in a risky territory because of the bad volumes. The Nemesis, actually a little bit of upwards pressure in the last week or so, heading back for 25 million. Yep, almost 24.5 for the sellers, 21 million still for the buyers. So this is the situation that I'm a little bit afraid of, right? The Nemesis is basically exemplifying that. Our tops go from 30 million down to 27.5 million, just above 25 million, and our upswing is at 24.5 million, and our bottoms 20 million, 22.5 on the chart. And so we are basically losing a lot of volatility in the Nemesis. You can still buy them below 21 million, which is pretty damn cheap, historically speaking, but you have to be careful again with the volumes. If you end up stuck with a lot of them, at the moment, to me, it looks like the pressure is on for take 2 ships, and we could actually end up with lower spikes, but lower bottoms as well at some point. The market still has to decide on that though. The Oneros continuing to meander below the 160 million range. Yeah, 164 for the sellers, 148 for the buyers. That's still the same story. I haven't done it yet, but if you can grab one, definitely put up a buy order and then try to buy it for like 150, which a couple of months ago was like not something you would have expected. And so here you don't have the volumes, but you can see the pressure on that market. And so it could entirely be that instead of having spikes up to 220 and 230, we are now going to see bottoms at 150 and spikes up to 200, 190 million, something like that. We could see a new range developing in Take 2 ships. The Panther, all right, very interesting as well, right? After a bump due to a change to the ships themselves, now we have a straight line down to 1 billion ISK. Less than that for the first sellers, 965 million for the buyers. So again, it's that same story. I don't think the market is certain of wanting to do that because that's quite a bit of aggressive buying compared to these sell prices. But eventually it may just decide that, yeah, actually, you know what, Panthers, 860 million is 900 million for the buy prices could become the new range. And if that happens, yeah, you could see that lower range materialize on the entire chart. The Purifier moving sideways below 25 million ISK here. 24.4 for the sellers, 22 million, pretty much in line with the Hounds. So again, you could buy very cheaply compared to this entire chart, but I would be very careful. Next up here we get the Scimitar making its way back up above 200 million ISK, but very, very slowly. None of that July volatility with a jump up to 350, unfortunately. Yeah, 204 for the sellers, 189 for the buyers. Then we get the Widow that's bouncing off of that 1 billion back towards 1.1 billion. So this is not a done deal, right? I think it is possible that we will see a lower range across the board in Take-Two ships, but it's not a done deal. And the Widow is actually showing a counterpoint to that yeah, any increased demand, you know, Take-Two ships, it's not like availability is that great, and it puts the sellers right back at 1.1 billion and forces the buyers very close to a billion ISK as well, on like demand of maybe half a dozen ships or something like that. So it's not a done deal. Finally, we get the Zealot that is showing the pressure once again, and clearly the lowering of the volatility, the lower spikes are very visible here as well. Back below 200 million on average, 205 for the sellers, 186 for the buyers. So very interesting situation for the Take-Two ship market. It's scaring me a little bit. I've got some holdings. I'm not sure if I want to. I definitely don't want to increase the stuff that I have. So I've got the Guardian at 184, Hans at 22.5. Yeah, I keep in mind including taxes here. Purifiers at 22 million, Zealot at 187. So you can beat those prices at the moment, but if I would do anything, it would be diversify, right? Get a couple more extra Take-Two ships at these very cheap prices. Stuff like the Ishtar looks pretty interesting. But it has to be very pronounced, right? The Ishtar looks interesting. Actually, the Panther actually looks kind of interesting as well, although that becomes a very big investment all of a sudden. But I would only go like maybe one chip and then hold on and see how the market evolves before I decide what to do with these ships, because that Take-Two ship market with what's happening in advanced movements, it's kind of worrying me a little bit. Next up, Take-3 ship market coming in at 40.55. Let's take a look at these. We had a bit of pressure on all of these to go up in price a little bit, and here is the Confessor above 40 million ISK all of a sudden. 42 for the sellers, 38 for the buyers. Last 24 hours, half a page. Decent volumes, nothing too outlandish, so this feels okay to me. Then next up here we get the Hecate, which was the reason why we're seeing some upwards pressure, but it's holding on to a nice little margin above 40 million ISK here, 49 for the sellers and 43 for the buyers. Volume wise, this is in line with the Confessor. A little bit of surprise here, but it's basically taking some time to absorb that spike up to 60 million for the Hecate. So the Jackdaw, I'm expecting upwards pressure, and we are, look at that, going above 40 million ISK as well. 44 now for the sellers, 37 for the buyers, and it looks like this is where a bit of production and moves went, trying to sell in the last 24 hours from 44.5 down to less than 44 million. So this is gonna keep the Jackdaw in check on the chart, but there's still room for more Hecates to come to the market and a decently steady supply of Confessors, so I'm not that worried. I think the Jackdaw will not necessarily crash down or anything like that on that massive supply, because there's still room to fill the gap, and that should put upwards pressure on this Vapel chart, which it does. Look at that, slowly heading towards 40 million on today's average. Sellers are, well, a couple of aggressive ones at 34 million, but 39 for the rest of them. 34 million for the buyers, so that is that uptrend, as at the moment Confessors, Hecates and Jackdaws are very attractive to be producing, and all of that because that Hecate bump here is taking a much longer time to absorb than I think it was in the Confessor. Yeah, this Confessor bump here, that was like next to nothing, right away back below 40 million ISK. You can see daily averages just crashing down in less than a week, right back to that 40 million range. This now is completely different here in the Hecate, and so we're seeing this bump in the Hecate that is actually driving prices up for almost all of these tactical cruisers, but we're also not seeing anything completely outlandish supply wise that is going to be impossible for the market to absorb, and that's going to push prices down very violently. So unfortunately here, I think a great place for producers of this stuff, but for active traders, yeah, looks like the market is not set for volatility just yet. I think it could be different in the cruisers. You may already have seen that the Tengu went up 20% all of a sudden on the sell price. So here is the Legion holding on to its gains at 160 million ISK. Yes, 162 for the sellers, 145 for the buyers. Then we've got the Loki, that's also jumping back up to 180 now. 182 million on no supply, 157 for the buyers. So this is definitely like a supply bottleneck. Or manipulation, of course, by 40-50 hulls. Don't bring him to the market. That spooks in the market like this. And then we've got the Proteus that, yeah, trying to get back up above 150. It is the least popular one, so 158 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. Availability quite a bit better than the previous ones. And then what the hell was happening with the Tengu? Look at that moonshot right here on today's daily average, well above 180, 194 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers. And look at availability. This is basically, I think, you buy everything, you relist it, and you try to take a profit out of that. And that is the advantage and disadvantage of this cruiser market. The disadvantage, I would say, you never know when this is going to happen, and it's very difficult to do, you know, consistent trading or to do big volumes here. But the advantage is if you take a one gamble, like you could have bought a Tengu not that long ago for probably close to 130 million ISK, well, you're looking at a nice potential as long as you only have one ship to sell. And so here now, for instance, for the Loki, yep, selling for 180, I think a 179 would be picked up decently quickly, and I'm holding one that's at 150. Is definitely a trade that I could try to make. And sorry, I need to drink here. And there we go. So for the cruiser market, it actually looks like a good time if you want to sell and you have some holdings to do so. Legion up a little bit, Loki in a good spot, and the Tengu very expensive at the moment. And then finally we have the extra product, which is a request from a viewer, the faction cruisers coming in at 4610. Like that, we're talking cruisers. And we'll start with the pirate factions. Let's take a look at that. Here is the Ashimu. That looks quite expensive. Yep, 80 million for the Ashimu. Definitely a nice move up. Could be tied to the Nullsec war, I think. If I'm not mistaken, BPCs drop in certain spaces for these ships, and so at the moment, less ratting, less PvE activity, more PvP activity. That is causing a bottleneck, and so the Ashimu up to 81 million. Now, I actually have an Ashimu that I bought on a very cheap here not that long ago for exploration, so I could easily get, I think, like a 20 million profit on that hull if I would fly it to Jita or maybe even to Amar and then sell it there. So that's very interesting. Cinnabal is holding on 130, so I do think this is a regional thing. Angel Cartel volumes are up though, but from a very close to 1 year low point. We're talking 134 for the sellers, 120 for the buyers. Definitely on the cheap end, I think, for the Cinnabal. The Ortrus is actually diving down to 1 year low point at 190 million, 198 for the sellers, 176 for the buyers. If you're looking for a cheap jump in on the Ortrus, right now try to buy it below 180. That would make sense. It's also an amazing ship, an amazing exploration ship. I have the Exploratrus myself, which is fit for exploration. Very, very, very strong platform. After that, we've got the Phantasm. Alright, Sanchez Nation up to almost 200 million from 75 million in about 1 month time. 177, a little bit of plugging is already happening. 148 for the buyers, but this is an incredible increase. Oh, look at the volumes as well here. That is a little bit harder to say exactly what's happening. So let me know in the comments if this is right. Could this be for Abyss, or is this Nullsec? Is someone fielding Phantasm fleets in Nullsec? Or ESS? right? Because no, I was thinking greater speed, but that's not exactly that either. Yeah. Let me know in the comments, why is the Phantasm up this much in volumes here all of a sudden, and the price has more than doubled. Very, very impressive one. Next up here, the Stradios trading at the high end of the range, going for around 200 million, 206 for the sellers, 185 for the buyers. Not seeing a volume impact here, just like with the Phantasm, or a volume explanation, just like with the Phantasm. So this one is actually very expensive at the moment. Then we have the Gila that is climbing steadily out of a period of being very cheap, around 160 million at the bottom. Started the year at 210 and it's making its way back, 200 million for the Gila, 178. That's definitely a pretty big move, and yeah, very steady gains on anyone that invested in Gilas at that low point here below 160. And then finally we've got the Vigilant. That's actually also pretty damn expensive at the moment. Slight volume increase here as well. 230 million for the sellers, 183 for the buyers. It's a little bit mixed. Some of them are very cheap, some of them are very expensive all of a sudden, some of them with volume, some of them without volumes. Very interesting stuff. Thank you very much for that suggestion here. These pirate faction battles cruisers are very nice if you're looking for a slower trade, it looks like, right? Because this is another move here, 4 months going from 160 to 200. Here we get another couple of months up to 210. Then let's take a quick look at the Ortrus, for instance. Yeah, definitely a slower pace than Tech 2 ships, but you can have some very nice returns here over the course of a couple of months in a pretty steady way. Nice. Let's take a look at the Navy factions next. First of all, Stormbringer, a little bit of a personal interest in that ship myself. Still going for less than 200 million. 193 for the sellers, 154 for the buyers. But yeah, the skill books for the weapons and things like that, I think, are still a little bit too expensive. I haven't checked in a while, but I will at some point. Next up, Augur Navy issue. All right, Amar. Up in price substantially, up to 70 million ISK. 70 million for the sellers, 49 for the buyers. That's a pretty big gap between the two, so a lack of availability is driving the price up substantially. Caracal Navy issue flat at a high point of above 80 million here, 84 for the seller, 75, very expensive as well. Executor Navy issue 60 million, right on the average, bit of volumes as well, but it's coming in nicely. 59 for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers. Omen is Amar as well, no move here, so it's ship based. It's no longer based on the faction warfare faction here. Omen Navy issue flat at 55. Osprey Navy issue, this is an exception for Kaldari, high point, and then Osprey also 1 year high point, selling at the moment for almost 100 million ISK, very expensive for Osprey Navy issue. Another one that I have a hull that I bought on the cheap for exploration here, so I could definitely make some profit on that as well. Side Navy issue, very quick increase in price from 40 million start of October to 80 million at the moment. Very big change here. So then I'm really curious as for the Stabber, also 1 year high point though, 80 million ISK as well here for the Stabber fleet issue. Completely drained of that in Jita. What about around Jita? Nothing. So yeah, if you happen to have a Stabber fleet issue, you can definitely try to make some ISK on that. And then the Vexor Navy issue, also very expensive at 60 million ISK at the moment. Very interesting. So there's definitely less correlation between these ship prices and faction warfare, in the sense that, all right, this side is winning, so their LP is super cheap, all of their ships become super cheap. There is actually disparity, for instance, with the Executor, no, it was the Augurer that was actually going up substantially, and then the Omen that's actually flat over the last month here. So there's less of that, but it still does exist. Caracal Navy issue, Osprey Navy issue being very expensive, both the Scythe and the Stabber doing big jumps here all of a sudden. It's interesting, but it's not as predictable anymore as what it was before. So very, very nice. Quite a few expensive faction cruisers, both in the pirate and the navy factions. So if you happen to have some of these and you're not using them actively, this could be a very great time to sell those. And that's gonna be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.